This week I'm trying to solve a dilemma, and BookTube, I'm hoping you can help. You see, in a few days, weather permitting, I'm going to be on a backpacking trip, 4 days, 3 nights through the part of the Great Smoky Mountains. I'm in the middle of like 3 or 4 different books, and so I was trying to figure out what book to take with me because there's probably going to be some downtime, right? But that got me thinking, what would be the best book to read by Campfire, especially if that campfire is miles and miles away from any civilization. So that's the subject of today's video. I'm going to give you 5 recommendations on what books I think would be best to read out in the wilderness somewhere. I'm going to judge these books by 2 criteria. The first is that the book has to be set in a remote location somewhere. And I'm going to rank them on a scale of 1 to 5 campfires, 5 being the best. Second criteria is it has to be good. I've read most of these books, so I'm going to rank them 1 to 5 based on my opinion of the book itself. But if I haven't read them, I'm going to base it off of recommendations and possibly other reviews. The first of these books are going to be horror books because that just seems like the thing to do. You're out in the middle of nowhere. That sense of isolation is what horror is good at playing upon. So horror makes up 4 of the 5 choices. The first 2 books are written by the same author, Stephen King. Book number 1, Salem's Lot, which was Stephen King's second published novel. Just last week, we posted D3 Read's take on the most influential horror writers of all time. And Stephen King was at the top of the list. Salem's Lot was on the top of that list too. But in this particular case, what I'm talking with the subject being what to read by Campfire, I think Salem's Lot is a really strong read. In Salem's Lot, a writer goes back to his childhood home to try to get the inspiration he needs to write a book. He's inspired by an old house that many people said was haunted. His arrival coincides with mysterious deaths that start happening in Salem's Lot. It's a classic vampire story. It's incredibly scary. One of my favorites. In terms of remoteness, we're talking about early 1970s rural setting. So pre-internet, New England, out in the middle of nowhere. 2 out of 5 campfires in terms of remote setting. So not the highest, right? But as far as the second criteria, as far as how good it is, 5 out of 5 campfires, absolutely. I read it years ago, absolutely loved it. I was traumatized as a child by the movie version of it that came out in the late 70s. And I hear that they're coming up with a new remake of the story here later on this year. So it'd be a good time to revisit. Second book, also by Stephen King, is The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. Now, this book, remote location, is dead on, 5 out of 5 campfires. If you're not familiar with the plot, the main character is a young girl by the name of Trisha. And Trisha gets lost at the beginning of the story out in the New England wilderness while she's hiking with her family. As she starts trudging deeper and deeper into the wilderness with no idea how to get home. She soon starts running into the elements, into a lack of food and water, and she starts to hallucinate. And one of the things she starts to hallucinate is a baseball player named Tom Gordon that she idolizes. But there's also a malevolent force that seems to be stalking her as she goes through, as the story plays out. I read this book when I was in the Air Force. I was at a deployed location and I was waiting to come home, and we were kind of stuck out there waiting for an airplane to show up. So I found a copy of this. I had no idea what it was about. I wound up reading it in like less than 3 days. I was just totally sucked into the story. So this is a creepy story. Again, remote location. You can't get any more remote or relevant to a camping trip than a person who has lost hiking. And the story is just solid. I give that one a good 4 out of 5 campfires. So 5 out of 5 for remoteless, 4 out of 5 for story. So this is a strong contender if you're looking for something to take with you on a camping trip. Number 3 is The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. Now, I'm kind of on a Netflix horror kick. More specifically, I'm on a Mike Flanagan horror kick on Netflix. Yeah, Mike Flanagan is a director that's been around for a number of years, made lots of classic horror movies. I've been going through his horror anthology. So The Haunting of Hill House is one I'm just now finishing. Fall of the House of Usher, Midnight Mass. So the only one that I haven't watched yet is The Haunting of BL Manor. While The Haunting of BL Manor is based on a short novel by Henry James called The Turn of the Screw. I've got that book, I've started it, I'm about a third of the way through, and it qualifies for this as well. Now, The good thing about it is a short novel, so it's easy to carry, portable, so you'll be able to take it with you out on a camping trip without too much weight added on. Remoteness, I want to give it a 3 out of 5 campfires. The setting of the story is in a manor, an estate that's outside of a town in back in the late 1800s, and so it is remote. It's not it's not camping. It certainly plays upon that sense of isolation that horror is so good at exploiting. As far as story, I'm giving it a 3 out of 5 campfires so far that I've gotten. The only reason I'm giving it 3 out of 5 is simply because it was written in the late 1800s, and they tend to be written quite dense. Sometimes it's a little hard to read because the character describes her emotions a little bit too thoroughly, and sometimes you lose track, or at least I do, lose track on who she's referring to. But as far as the creepiness and the ghosts, yeah, spot on, definitely worth your time. The very next one, number 4, is one that we reviewed a couple of weeks ago. The other side of D3 Reads, Jeff, put out a video talking about the Newsflesh series by Mia Grant. The Newsflesh series by Mia Grant talks about a zombie apocalypse. It's a few years into the future. It just sounds fascinating. The stories take place actually in urban settings, in cities, right? But because it's a zombie apocalypse, the sense of isolation is almost certainly there. In this book, I guess some man-made viruses kind of came together and created this mutation that wound up turning a lot of people into zombies. And so zombies doing what zombies doing, humanity's on the brink of collapse. They're trying their best to survive the zombie apocalypse. Now, Jeff tells us in his review that the book does a great job balancing character-driven plot as well as zombie fun. It sounds intriguing. As far as remote settings go, we're going to give it 2 out of 5. The setting is a city, but it would have that sense of isolation, being a zombie apocalypse story. And we're going to give it 3 out of 5 campfires based off of Jeff's review, that the story is solid and well delivered. And finally, the last one is the one I'm actually pretty excited about. It is not a horror story at all. It's humor. It's written by Dave Barry, and it was published last year, and it's called Swamp Story. I am a huge Dave Barry fan. I've been reading his works for decades now, whether articles he published in the Miami Herald when he worked as a humor writer for them, or in his books. I've loved Dave Barry for years. And in this book in particular, I'm excited about because I actually got to meet Dave Barry at a book signing. He was up in Columbus, which is only a couple hours from where I live. So I got to drive up there, meet him, get a signed copy of the book, but I haven't had a chance to read it yet. So I'm excited about this. This book is relevant. The setting is a remote area. It's set in the Everglades. The main character is a person by the name of Jessie. Jessie is someone who is essentially stuck in a cabin in the Everglades, and she just wants to change her life and she wants to get out of there. But she doesn't really have any options. Her boyfriend's a deadbeat and she doesn't have any money. And one day, evidently, she comes across a treasure buried in the Everglades. And this is her ticket out of there. It's worth a lot of money and she's got her way out. But it turns out there's some bad guys who are also aware of this treasure, and they begin hunting it down and hunting Jessie down. So Jessie now has to figure out how to get out with this treasure and to stay alive. Sounds like a lot of fun. Dave Barry's written a number of novels now. Big Trouble, I think, was his first novel. I read that, loved it. For remoteness, we're going to give it 3 out of 5 campfires taking place in the Everglades. And for how well it is, I'm going to go preemptively say it's going to be 5 out of 5 campfires. I'll change it if I change my mind. But based off of everything I've read for Dave Barry, and I have read a lot, I'm expecting this to knock it out of the park. So those are my 5 options that I've got right now. Let me know what you think. Which one would you choose to take with you on a backpacking trip out into the middle of nowhere for several nights? Or if none of these, let me know. Let me know if you've got a better option. I am all ears. I am really excited about this. I think it's going to be a neat experience. Thank you so much for your time. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Check out our other site, Damper 3. And thank you so much for your time. Have a great day.